Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Eugene Vindman of Virginia. Congressman, thanks for coming on. I think it's notable that Trump is talking aggressively now about Putin, seeming to come to the realization that many in the intelligence and national security space have had about the Russian president for a while. But let's focus on the tangibles here. That pause in weapons shipment, now the president saying he wants to pick back up in sending that defensive aid. Probably welcome news in Kyiv, but is your understanding that the weapons are now back flowing? I mean, where does this stand?
Well, look, we're still looking to verify this. Last week, when we learned about the pause, profoundly ignorant move, apparently not approved by the White House or the president. Really odd to hear the president say, I don't know, you tell me, when he's the commander in chief. But we're looking to confirm that. The president's saying that the weapons shipments will resume, and they need to resume and fast and in greater quantities.
What does it say that the president is there either ignorant or pretending he is about how these weapons were paused in the first place? What does that say about the way that this war is being conducted?
Well, it's very uncoordinated, and one of the things I see is I'm a former legal advisor on the National Security Council, is that the complete absence of the National Security Council, the coordinating function that you see out of the National Security Council is missing. Each department and agency is doing its own thing. The Department of Defense apparently is pausing critical shipments of previously approved weapons to the Ukrainians at the same time that the Russians are ramping up. Last night was a historic, most significant drone attack of the war. 728 drones attacked Ukraine, and that comes on the heels of, on July 4th, 529 drones attacked, which was the previous historic record. So the Russians are ramping up, and for some reason the Department of Defense was reducing pressure rather than increasing pressure, and that's not how you get the Russians to the bargaining table.
Yeah, you're right that we've seen an increase in Russian aggression with Ukraine. But you were one of more than 50 members of Congress who signed a bipartisan letter that was sent to the Department of Defense on July 3rd. You were basically asking questions there about why these weapons were halted in the first place. You set a deadline of response for tomorrow. Have you heard anything back from these folks? I think one of the demands that you had in the letter was just give us a classified briefing on what exactly happened here. Is that briefing now on the books?
The briefing is not yet on the books. Obviously, we're going to follow up. This is a bipartisan letter, so it's not just, House Democrats. I authored this letter to get as many people on board as possible, and we had 54 or so people sign on, including 3 Republicans. And so we're demanding answers, and we expect the Department of Defense, especially on the heels of them asking for additional money. We're in the process of negotiating what the National Defense Authorization Act will look like this year. Yeah. We expect them to answer our questions when we pose them.
Yeah, that NDAA is always such a huge piece of legislation, and so it's interesting to hear the ways that it's a part of this conversation. But when you hear the Pentagon explanation for why they paused these weapons shipments in the first place, they say that it was a question of replenishing the U.S. stockpile before they were sending more munitions out the door to our allies. But what's your actual understanding of the situation? Was there concern over the stockpiles? Because experts have said that's not quite right, at least not their understanding. What are they telling Congress?
Look, I'm highly skeptical is the bottom line. I served 25 years in the Army. I served on the National Security Council. The types of weapons that we were sending to Ukraine are not useful in a contingency other than land war in Europe. And the Ukrainians are the ones that are fighting this war. They're not particularly useful in a China contingency. I'm highly skeptical about this rationale. I think it's a pretext, and it wasn't coordinated. It's just a profoundly ignorant move, and it needs to be reversed as soon as possible, as well as the sanctions package that is now moving through the Senate. I would love to see that in the House as soon as possible as well. Senator Blumenthal is leading that effort to impose very harsh sanctions on, and Senator Graham on Russia.
Yeah, and Senator Blumenthal says he hopes to see the Senate move on that, in his words, very soon. Even the president saying that he's looking at that package between Graham and Blumenthal, which, when we're talking about things that are bipartisan, has more than 80 co-signatures on it, making it one of the more bipartisan things we've seen the Senate do during this Congress. A lot of threads for us to follow here. I want to follow up with you about if and when you hear back about that letter. Please come back and talk to us about it when you do. Democratic Congressman Eugene Vindman of Virginia, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Ellie.